Hello. So today I'm going to give a general guide to playing on high ping and how you can be not entirely useless. I have around 4,000 hours and I've only ever played on 200 ping or higher, but for the most part I play on 280 ping and I can usually place my shots where I want them. I'm aware that this game is dying and has a very small player base, so I'm aware that a lot of people kind of have to play on high ping. For console players, I'm not sure if you can see what server you're playing on to know if you're on high ping or not, so you'll just have to figure that out at the start of a match. We'll start off with the server reticle. So every input in crossout is affected by ping, and by moving and shooting you can easily feel that. Your crosshair however has no delay. The crosshair you see in game is based off of your client. It has zero delay and it's often misleading, and that's because of the server reticle. Unfortunately you can't turn this on or show it to my knowledge, but with time and practice you start to know where it is anyway. So essentially you need to aim your crosshair X ping ahead of the target, and you need to be aware that the true crosshair is invisible and is lagging behind. It's kind of difficult to show what I'm talking about fighting a bot, but in the background footage you might see that often my shots are nowhere near, like my crosshair is nowhere near the target when I shoot, but the shots are still hitting anyway. That's sort of because I'm taking into account the server reticle. But against the bot here, I'm going to aim at him and then I'll flick off, and I'll flick off as I click, and you can kind of see the delay. And we'll just wait for him to stop so I can kind of show it. Like that. So when I flick off, that's what I'm shooting. There isn't really an easy way around this. Time and practice is your best friend, and try to stay consistent with the servers you play on. For me, I have 200 ping on NA and 300 on EU, but I rather play EU because the players are generally better and you get matches a lot faster. So I try to avoid NA servers so I don't bounce between 200 then 300 ping and ruin my muscle memory. I will give some tips for aiming however, and how you can make sure you're putting yourself in an advantageous fight every time. Now I'm going to be using the Scorp as my reference because it's the easiest way for me to get the message across. Just to make sure though, this does work with every weapon, any weapon type. It's just the Scorp is the easiest way for me to explain things. The optimal range you want to take fights at is mid to long range. The longer the range, the simpler and more straightforward aiming becomes, as there's less server reticle you need to account for. But at extreme ranges, it gets to a point where it's impractical to even take fights, as the two of you are just gambling with who's going to drive into whose shot first. Mid range is also perfect. This is where I confidently take most fights, but you need to be quick on your toes because at close range it starts to get dicey, and face hugging ranges is really bad. But if I do, you can see just how much I'm leading and how aiming is purely based on gut feeling. The reason it's so difficult at this range, even though the target is seemingly bigger, is because of how fast the target is moving. Obviously the speed is the same at this range and 1,000 meters away, but think of it on your screen. At 300 meters away, they're only moving 100 pixels or so. At this range, they're moving thousands in the same period of time. So you're needing to account for those thousands of pixels 300 milliseconds in the future. Talking about target size, try to avoid using scopes like Iris, Neutrino, whatever the other one is, and even your default scope if you're learning, because zooming in makes the target bigger and amplifies the delay on your server reticle, meaning you need to lead a lot more than if you had no scope at all. If you have good eyes, you're better off using no scope and aiming for weapons and modules from the default view. Hitting shots is a lot easier that way. Now we'll talk about movement and movement parts. If you're learning, try to stick with omnidirectional movement, specifically hovers, MLs, and meat grinders, and try to avoid normal wheels. The reasoning is because the delay with omnidirectional movement just feels like you have more power drain and slower acceleration. This is very easy to cope with. Normal wheels, however, are very difficult to use, and on a lot of maps, you just park into walls very frequently. I don't know the exact reason why, but trust me, wheels are very hard to use. Now, talking about movement, while you're learning, try to avoid shooting while moving, whether it's forwards, backwards, falling, left, right. Any sort of movement, when you want to shoot, come to a stop, because you moving is adding server reticle delay, even without moving your mouse. So here I'm strafing left and right, and when my crosshair is on his cabin, that's what I'm shooting. And you can see that it's just missing. And side note, aiming is much easier on spiders and augers because you're a lot slower. And now we'll talk about enemy movement. There isn't much to it, it's basically predicting their micro movements, like where a hover will stop when he peeks and which direction he strafes to after he shoots. Most of this just comes with time, but the biggest issue I have with enemy movement is bad players on Omni Wheels, Atoms, and Myriads. These players have no idea where they're going, and their sudden random movement is completely unpredictable and catches me off guard like 9 out of 10 times. So you're on your own for that one. A quick side note, if you're playing on a server that has 20, maybe 30 more ping than normal, you need to account for this a lot more than you might think. Going from 1 ping to 20 isn't noticeable, but going from 280 to 300 is the equivalent of going from 1 ping to 90. Again, I don't know why, I'm not a server dev guy, I'm not sure why it feels like this, but it does. Moving on to weapons, the easiest weapons to use are Athenas, Destructors, Triggers, Jupiters, Mandrakes, and Heathers. Not Swarm, because this needs a good bit of practice. This is because 3 of these are hit scan. Now beware, on high ping, you still need to lead in certain situations, but nevertheless, these are the most high ping friendly weapons. The weapons to stay away from are machine guns, shotguns, plasma emitters, yokai, varun, and flutes. Maybe another weird weapon here and there, but for the most part, don't use these. Machine guns and plasma emitters are okay on spider builds, but everything else, don't use them. Shotguns you have to aim off the screen, and that isn't a joke. Varun doesn't work properly because of the ping and delay between shots. Yokai is way too difficult, and flutes don't make any sense. Pretty much everything else works fine though with a bit of practice. Flamethrowers are very weird to use, so probably avoid them, but with practice you can make it work. And that's pretty much it. Just practice while keeping the server reticle in mind and you won't be entirely useless. Bye bye.